A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. On a Sabbath, Jesus went to dine at the home of one of the leading Pharisees, and the people there were observing him carefully. He told a parable to those who had been invited, noticing how they were choosing the places of honor at the table. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not recline at table in the place of honor. A more distinguished guest than you may have been invited by him, and the host who invited both of you may approach you and say, "Give your place to this man," and then you would proceed with embarrassment to take the lowest place. Rather, when you are invited, go and take the lowest place, so that when the host comes to you, he may say, "My friend, move up to a higher position." Then you will enjoy the esteem of your companions at the table. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. Then he said to the hosts who invited him, "When you hold a lunch or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or your wealthy neighbors, in case they may invite you back and you have repayment. Rather, when you hold a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Blessed indeed will you be because of their inability to repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
If you could pick one word to describe what today's readings are about, what would that word be? Humility. Humility is the word. Thank you for listening. A lot of times people don't pay attention and they don't know what the readings are about. But today's readings, especially the first reading, the Psalm, and the Gospel, is about humility. And we hear this word, we use this word, but sometimes we don't really understand what it means. But also, it's not something that is highly promoted in our world today. Right? In our society, we promote a lot of things, but rarely do we hear the society, the culture, hold up humility as something to be desired, something that's sought after. No, somehow humility can take on a negative connotation as well, maybe being weak, maybe being submissive, and things like that. But humility is so important. We hear Chris sing between the Alleluia. He repeated the words of Jesus. I'm not going to test you, Chris. But he said, repeated the words of Jesus, "Learn from me, take after me, for I am meek and humble of heart." So this is the one time in the entire Bible that Jesus says specifically, imitate me in this area, in my humility. So what is humility? Well, the readings help us to understand. The first reading says that conduct your affairs in humility. And it also goes on to explain things that are too sublime, search not. Things that are beyond your strength, seek not. Be comfortable with who you are. Be humble. So humility comes from the word humus or hummus, which means the ground, the earth. To be humble is to be grounded in who we are, to know who we are objectively. Here's the problem, is that most of us, we don't know ourselves objectively. We think too highly of ourselves. We think too highly of our abilities, our gifts, our talents, right? And that's not true. Objectively, we're like down here. But when we think of ourselves, we think of ourselves as being up here, capable of doing things that really are beyond our natural abilities. Yes, God can make things happen, but first we have to understand where we're at. We have different talents, but we also have shortcomings. We have limitations. And that's what the first reading is about know your limitations. Know who you are, know your gifts, but also your shortcomings, and live that way. Don't think that you're up here when you're actually down here. Be grounded, be comfortable in your own skin, in who you are. And so that's essential. Saint Teresa of Avila described it this way. She said, humility is truth. Knowing the truth of who we are and who God is, and how everything that we are and all the good that we can do comes from God as gift. Yes, we all have abilities, we all have different talents, but where do they really come from? They come from God as gifts. Sure, we've cooperated with God to develop them, to foster them, to perfect them, but for God, we wouldn't have these talents, these abilities at all. But even before we talk about talents and gifts, let's talk about the very basic. If we know who we are and who God is, we would realize that the fact that we are alive, the fact that we exist, the fact that we're sitting here right now is a gift from God. Because without God, without his gift, we wouldn't be here. You and I would not be here right now. You wouldn't hear me right now, but for the gift of hearing. I wouldn't be speaking to you right now, but for the gift of speech. You wouldn't understand what I'm saying except for the gift of understanding, right? Everything is gift. Your health, your family, your jobs, your hobbies, football, everything is a gift. Do you realize that? And that's the truth. Once we realize that everything we are, all the good that we can do, comes from God as gift. So once we realize objective truth, we wouldn't be prideful. We would be humble. We would accept who we are. Basically, we are nothing without God. And to give credit where credit is due, right? So, but that's not our world today. In our world today, people like to build themselves up. They like to think highly of themselves and their abilities and so on. But that's a lie. And who is the liar? Who's the father of lies? Satan. Satan loves to plant these things in people's heads, you and I, to say that you can do that. You're better than that. You can be famous. You can do whatever you want and things like that. And we hear this tone, this attitude in our world today, right? Every time when people give a speech to a graduating class or something like that, or even parents telling their children, even well-intentioned people wanting to motivate our young children or whatever, will say something along the line that you can do whatever you put your mind to. You can accomplish anything. But that's not true. That's not reality, right? When I was a kid, I wanted to be Michael Jordan, right? I wanted to take off from the free throw line and dunk the basketball. Can I do that? How do you know I can't do that? No, it's true. I can't do that. No matter how much I try or practice, I never am going to be Michael Jordan. I have to accept that reality, right? I also wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to play guitar on stage and have the ladies go wild. But that never happened, and that can never happen. It's not reality. So that's the thing, is that objectively, I'm right here. But when we dream, we're up here. And it's okay to dream as long as we know that we're dreaming, right? As long as we know that we're dreaming. But the thing is, people buy into that, and they get frustrated when they don't achieve what they want, because it's not objectively possible. It's not real, right? And so even like I say, well-intentioned parents and teachers create this unnecessary stress. There's this huge gap between who we are and what we want to accomplish. And so there's this distress, unnecessary distress, that we put on ourselves and our relationships. That's why people get anxious, they get depressed, because they're not able to do what is impossible for them. And so we have to depend on God for everything, all the good that we can do. Yes, with God, anything is possible, but alone, nothing is possible, right? And that's our world today. Our world today, the theme and the message is that you alone can do anything you want without reference to God. And that's not true. That's the enemy. That's the world. That's our concupiscence speaking. And so when we close that gap, the distress goes away. Yes, I have dreams, I have desires, but I also know who I am. I know my limitations. I know my skills and my limitations. And here's another thing when we know ourselves objectively. I know my sins. I know my flaws. I know my faults. And that's what the world is blind to. Most people don't even think about sin. They don't even talk about sin. They don't even talk about God or offending God. And so they think that they're fine. They don't realize their sins and how offensive they are and how evil they are capable of, right? And so when we are enlightened by the Holy Spirit to see ourselves as God sees us, to see our soul as it truly is, then we are frightened. Then we cannot be prideful. We realize that we're capable of so much evil. That but for the grace of God, I am where I am. But I'm capable of so much evil, and I sin and I offend God every day. Because of that knowledge, we cannot be prideful. We know ourselves, our flaws, our limitations, and our gifts. So first and foremost is knowledge. Ask the Holy Spirit to enlighten you, to help you to know yourself as you are, not who you want to be, not who you wish you would be, but as you are. Your gifts, your abilities, as well as your shortcomings and faults. Then you embrace that, right? I want to be Michael Jordan, but that's not going to happen. I accept myself for who I am. There are certain things that I'm good at. There are other things that I can't do. And that's okay. God made me the way I am. So that's what humility means. Being grounded, being comfortable, accepting who we are for who we are. And the next thing we hear about humility is Jesus speaking in the gospel, the reading, right? He's invited to a banquet by leading Pharisees. Again, somebody who's leading, who is a Pharisee, who's somebody who's important. So he goes into this banquet and he notices that people, the other invited guests, are jockeying for position. They want to sit in a place of honor at table, right? There's like a hierarchy, if you will. And most of them are choosing the places of honor rather than the lowly places. And so he has to tell them this parable, right? He said, when you're invited to a wedding banquet, don't seek the place of honor. Because when you seek the place of honor, the host may come up to you, and the host who invited everybody else may come up to you and said, my friend, I need you to move down. And you're going to be embarrassed. You're going to be humiliated in front of everybody. So don't seek the place of honor because somebody else who may be more distinguished than you, the host may want him to sit there instead. So don't put yourself in that position. Instead, take the lowest place. Then the host may come to you and say, my friend, move up. I want you to move up. Then you will be held in high esteem in front of others. So when Jesus refers to the wedding banquet, he's also referring to the wedding banquet in heaven. This is how heaven works. This is how we get into heaven. Not by putting ourselves up there, not by saying we deserve to be up there, but saying, I have my faults, I sin, I need God's mercy. Accepting ourselves, accepting this lowly position. And then Jesus will say, my friend, move up. I want to bring you up. And so that's how Mary is, right? Mary, the mother of God. She is humility itself. She is humble. She doesn't think much of herself. She refers to herself as the lowly handmaid of the Lord. I am his servant. I'm a slave. I'm a nobody. Right? And what did God do for her? He raised her up to be the mother of God, mother of Jesus. You see how that works? And that's what Jesus says in the gospel reading, right? Everyone who exalts himself will be humble, but those who humble himself will be exalted. Over and over, Jesus tells us about this theme. It's called the great reversal. Those who are first will be last, and those who are last will be first. If you build yourself up, if you think you're all that, then you're going to pay a price. Not only in this life, but in the next life. But if you are humble, if you accept your limitations, then God will raise you up in this life and in the next life. So Jesus is telling us that over and over again. Be humble, and I will lift you up. But if you exalt yourself, I will humble you. And the third thing that he tells us in the gospel reading, he speaks to the hosts. He said, when you throw a banquet, don't invite your friends and your wealthy neighbors, those who will repay you. Because there's sort of this expectation back then, right? This host, he thinks he's important. He wants to invite important people so that why? To make himself look good, so that he can benefit down the line, that they may appreciate this invitation and they may invite him and remember him, and somehow he will benefit from this. But Jesus is saying, no, purify your intentions, purify your actions. Once you know yourself and once you live humbly, do things out of the goodness of your heart, purely. Don't seek for earthly rewards, right? That's what you're seeking. You're seeking to play that game. I'm in an important circle. I'm going to do them a favor. They're going to do me a favor. No, Jesus is saying those are earthly desires. Those are earthly thoughts. But instead, just invite those who cannot pay you back. The lame, the blind, the crippled. Because then your actions have merit. Your actions are valuable in the eyes of God, are pleasing to God. And then you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. You will go to heaven because of your goodness on earth. So don't seek temporary passing human esteem. Seek God's esteem. Seek God's praise. Right? Seek what is pleasing to God and not to men. So that's what humility is about. It's so important, yet we don't value it enough. And so let us accept ourselves for who we are. Let us ask the Holy Spirit to show us who we are. Accept our gifts, our talents, and our limitations. And then to live humbly. Don't try to promote ourselves, right? Don't try to impress others. Accept ourselves for who we are. Be comfortable with who we are, and God will raise us up. And also, don't seek human esteem or repayment. Be good, be genuinely good. Do good just for the sake of doing good. Then God will reward us in heaven.